Okay. Can you guys hear her over there? Okay, we were having a hard time. Thank you, Malcolm, and thank you, Veterans for Peace, for helping sponsor this part of my book tour. Thank you all for coming. I too feel like it is cutting out.
It's pretty good.
Is it okay?
I think you have to be close to it.
Oh, I have a very short attention span. So something like that just like distracts me and I get off kilter and everything. And thank you, David. So sweet, I love you. I think he actually heard about this event from me. Because I sent out my newsletter, and then you immediately emailed me about it. So sometimes those things work. And also our wonderful friend Brian Wilson and his partner Becky are here. So honored to have them here in the audience. Brian and I just spent some time together in Buffalo not too long ago, and we went to Occupy Buffalo, which was really cool. I want to tell a story about David, though. I met David first, I believe it was in New Orleans, right?
It was at Camp Casey.
No, we met before Camp Casey. We were both at New Orleans together. Remember Ward Riley had that jazz march or whatever, and we met in a bar in New Orleans? Do you remember? Do you remember? Do you remember? Do you remember now?
I remember Texas.
Yeah. So anyway, he didn't remember me because I wasn't famous. And, so then he did come to Camp Casey, and it's strange that I feel like I'm doing something nasty with this microphone. It's strange that at an event for me, he didn't sing my favorite song, which is a song he wrote about me and about my son, which I'm very honored to be included in his vast work of these wonderful people, unsung heroes and sung heroes. So it's really great. I always tease David that I feel like I should bring a notebook and a pen to his concerts because he gives out so much awesome information in his songs and in between his songs. Then he did come to Camp Casey, but I want to tell the story about when we were in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And so we sometimes David and I actually end up in the same place at the same time, which is always fun. And so we went to Pittsburgh to protest the G20. And we heard that the anarchists who were like this is funny, they had an office and they were organizing the protest. And we always thought that was fun. Yeah, they actually wouldn't let me go to one of the meetings. I was like, this is an anarchist thing? I tried to talk David, who had a rental car, into going by their office so I could throw a brick through the window. I thought that would be like really ironic, wouldn't it? And so, but that's not the story. So we heard that they were going to amass in a park, and that the police state was going to have overwhelming response to them. So David played somewhere, then we went over to the park. And there was a mass, the police amassed before the protesters even did. And we walk up to the police and we go, so what's going on here? Are you going to throw a riot later? And seriously. And that's exactly what happened. And it started to be chaos, and the police started chasing us. It was tear gas, and we were running. I was with this other guy, and this one activist from New York City. What's her name? Jennifer? Sarah. So it was David, Sarah, Josh, and me. And we were running, and all of a sudden it was just Josh and I running, and David and Sarah weren't running anymore. They were like, what the heck? What happened to them? And so Josh and I had this big adventure running from cops and being shot at, being tear gassed. And I think you texted us that you were sitting in the bar at the hotel. I think it was the Holiday Inn, and that's where the Prime Minister of Australia was staying, at the Holiday Inn. It was like really, really weird. Was it red at the time? Was red the...
Yeah.
So I tried to get back so we could kind of chat, but they were watching a soccer game in the bar, and then it was over. But here I am running all over, puking from the tear gas, getting shot at with rubber bullets, and he's sitting in a bar. Sarah sitting in a bar. I can't lie. If I had thought of it, I would have been doing that too. but we got caught up in the chase. It was really awful in Pittsburgh. At that particular protest was on the campus, and kids would just be, I say kids, but they're college students, would be going from studying back to their dorm, and the cops would chase them down and just literally beat them up. And they weren't even involved in the protest. But anyway, so that's my story about David. One story about David. I have a lot, but I'm not going to go into, this isn't about David tonight. So we've had some good activist time together. It doesn't always have to be doom and gloom and trudging along. You can smile every once in a while. You can have fun. But one story is we were in Houston, and Mimi Kennedy, the actress, was also there. We were having a protest against Barbara Bush in Houston, and we were going to invite her to tea because George Herbert Walker Bush had recently said, "Oh, Cindy Sheehan better not show her face in Houston. My wife will have something to say about that." I was like, really? Name the place. Name the time. And so we actually had a protest in front of their house. Not their house, their church. They had an Episcopal church. And so we set up like this table for tea. We invited her. She'd never showed up. But anyway, we were staying in Houston, and we had this really fun talent show. Remember? He doesn't remember anything. I lost, David won. So anyway, it's like you go to protests in other countries, and they're vibrant, and they're fun, and they sing, and they dance, and there's colors, and there's music and everything, and these are ours. We shall overcome. Well, it doesn't always have to be like that. These are serious issues, serious enough issues. Don't be afraid to smile and have fun along the way. So, it's great to be back here in Portland. I love Portland. It's like on my short list of a town I could move to. If it wasn't for the rain. What? I'm from Southern California. We had an event in Eugene last night, and it was supposed to be at a park. And of course it was a deluge last night. And I was like, nobody's gonna come. And they're like, if we stayed home every time it rained, we wouldn't go anywhere. This is Oregon. People will come. And so we had it in a bus. And then other people were like standing outside with their rain gear on and everything. They're like, I'm a duck. They're like, we're ducks, we don't care. I'm a desert tortoise, and I do care. So, but I love you guys, and I want to visit here as often as possible, and who knows? Portlandia is my favorite show. Who knows? I might show up. So I'm here to talk about, I'm going to do commercials first, and then I'll get into my my spiel. I have a radio show called Cindy Sheehan Soapbox. I know most of you are already on my website, but if you're not, this is to put your name and your email if you want to receive newsletters from me. I send out newsletters talking about who's going to be on my show this week, articles that I've written, activism that I'm doing, other articles, other activism, and things like that. So I send a newsletter at the most twice a week, but usually only once a week. So I'm going to start it going around.
Who did you recently add as contributors?
Oh, it's not about you either, John Gold. Okay. This is John Gold. He came from Philadelphia to come here today. So first time on the West Coast. It was really cute. I went out for a walk today and I came back and I said, it took me a little bit longer because I stopped to get veggies and hummus. He goes, you found hummus around here? Yeah, I think there's a few places in Portland you can get hummus. And so my blog, I've added authors, people who can contribute to my blog. John Gold is one of them. He usually writes about 9/11 truth issues, justice for the war criminals, and he posts a lot of stuff about me also, which is helpful for my blog. I added Cynthia McKinney, and I added Larry Pinkney. Does anybody know who that is? He writes for the Black Commentator. He's a Black Panther. He was the, I think, Interior Minister for the Republic of New Africa back in the day. And he's been a very strident, eloquent critic of the Obama administration. One of the few people of color who actually have been, since before, he supported Cynthia McKinney when she ran for president in the Green Party, as did I. And I added a young activist named Edmund Berger. He has been writing very good about co-option movements, most recently the Occupy movement and the 99% Spring. He's a brilliant young man. Who else did I add? David Swanson. War is a Crime, used to be after Downing Street. So anyways, so it's not just me blogging, it's other people blogging on my site too. What else? Oh. So I do have books for sale, and this is my first book. It's $5. It's articles that I wrote before I went to Crawford, during Camp Casey in the summer 2005, a little bit after. It has pictures and other information. So very early on in my activism. And then I'm here to talk about my new book, Revolution, a Love Story. And this is $12. And John and lovely Jen are over there. They're going to help me sell. It's hot in here, huh? They're going to help me sell the books, and I'd be happy to autograph them if you're into that. And I hope after I talk, everybody will buy a book. So this book, Revolution, a Love Story, did everybody see Capitalism, a Love Story? Well, it's kind of, I kind of stole the title and put revolution instead of capitalism. And it's the story of Hugo Chavez, Venezuela, and the Bolivarian Revolution. But I start way back in the 1700s, late 1700s, with Simón Bolívar, because he's very relevant to the story of Hugo Chavez and what's happening today. Why did I write a book about Venezuela and Hugo Chavez and the Bolivarian Revolution? Because I went there. I've been there several times already. Oh, thank you, Malcolm. And the first time I went to Venezuela was in January of 2006. I went to Caracas to the World Social Forum. Did you go to there, David? Anybody go to the World Social Forum in Caracas? Usually there's a couple people in the audience that did that. And so I was fresh from the first summer in Crawford, Texas. That was August of 2005. So I had invitations all over the world. Before I went to Venezuela, I had gone to Spain and Italy and Ireland and Great Britain. So, and then all over the country I was going. At that time, 2006, 2007, I figured that I spent at the most 25 days a month at home. And that was like a good month where I got to spend 5 or 6 days at home. And so I was invited to the World Social Forum. So I thought that the Social Forum was like this place where activists got together and had socials. I didn't know it was about socialism. And so, but we do that. We get together and we have fun and have socials and stuff, and we network. But, it's the subtitle for the World Social Forums and the U.S. Social Forums and local social forums, of course, is a better world is possible. And so there's a lot of rallies and speeches and teach-ins and seminars that you can go to. And I was doing all of that. And I was also invited to meet with President Chavez at the presidential palace, Miraflores. Prior to that, I had already attended a speech of his and was sitting with the honored guests up on the stage with Che Guevara's daughter and some other activists around the world and stuff. And he introduced me to the audience as Senora Coraje, Mother Courage. And of course, or Mrs. Courage. Of course, they called George Bush Senor Peligro, Mr. Danger. When I got to finally meet with him at Miraflores, I met somebody who was very warm, very kind, very caring, very human, as opposed to the politicians here that I had met, who were very politician-y. All of them were politician-y. I just made up a new word, but I think you understand what I'm saying when I say politician-y. Even Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, who became my nemesis in 2008 when I ran for Congress against her. A lot of, and Republican politicians too. I met with many, many politicians. I never felt like that much warmth. The politician I felt the most warmth from was Ted Kennedy. And, I met his counterpart, the junior senator, John Kerry, was in his office in 2005 when the phone rang. And Brian, you're good friends with him, aren't you? You used to be good friends with him. Well, this was in 2005 after the 2004 campaign. One of his daughters called him on his private cell phone. I swear to God, the ringtone was "Hail to the Chief." And I was like, dude, that ship sailed a long time ago. And so the World Social Forum was fun, it was exciting, it was energetic. We had one of those wonderful marches where it's colorful tambourines and dancing, and then there was this big rally. I'm going to tell a funny story before I go on further with Revolution, a Love Story. I got to speak at this rally with tens of thousands of people. I was the last person to speak. And most of the people there were Spanish speaking. So I was speaking in English and I had a Spanish translator from Cuba. I would speak, Alberto would translate. So it got to the end and I was like, and you can rest assured I'm not the only one in the United States who feels this way. And he translated, people clapped and cheered. I said, people are working very hard to hold George Bush accountable. And Alberto said that, people cheered. I said, not only do we want to hold him accountable, we want to impeach him and remove him from office. And Alberto said that, people were getting even more excited. And then I said, and we don't want to stop there. We want to, put him on trial and put him in prison. And Alberto translated it, the crowd went nuts. Viva Cindy! Woo! They're all dancing around and jumping. And I was like, oh man, I just kicked ass. They loved me. So I was going home through Miami. And Miami is not a hotbed of liberalism or even, the conservative Democrats. They are very right-wing and conservative. I'm not going to say everybody, but a lot of the people in Miami are right-wing and conservative. There's a so-called exiled Cuban community that's super-duper right-wing. And so I was going through customs or immigration to go back into the States, and this woman ran up to me. She's from the United States. She said, Cindy, my name is whatever. I was at the social forum. I said, yeah, me too. It was great. And she goes, I know, I was at the speech that you gave to the big crowd. I said, they loved me. And she goes, well, let me tell you why. I speak Spanish. I was like, they loved me because you speak Spanish? And she was like, no. When you said, held accountable, your translator said held accountable. When you said impeached and removed from office, your translator said impeached and removed from office. However, when you said tried and put in prison, your translator said executed. I was like, oh, I'll never see my children again. But then I thought, hey, isn't it legal in most places in the United States? The death penalty, I don't support it, not even for monsters like that. But who executed like a record number of people while he was governor? I mean, he didn't do it personally. I'm sure he would have loved to. While he was governor of Texas, of course, George Bush. So that's a funny little story. So I got home from the World Social Forum, and I experienced an inordinate number of attacks, on the media, by email, and many of the attacks were from the right, and I was used to it. I was attacked from the right all the time. But what I was surprised at were the attacks from the so-called left I was getting. Telling me that Hugo Chavez was a communist dictator, I shouldn't have met with him, blah, blah, blah. And so that wasn't the experience that I had when I was in Venezuela. But I wasn't, like Malcolm said, I wasn't as politically aware back then as I am today. So I decided to research, actually research. When I went down to Venezuela, I had no idea, that I was going to be a featured guest of the World Social Forum and of Hugo Chavez. So though I knew about him, of course, because not too long before that, he said at the UN that the devil must have spoken here because I can smell sulfur, And I thought, that's an awesome line. And so I knew that he was anti-U.S. imperialism, also anti-George Bush, and I'm against both of those things. And so I thought, I really didn't know too much about the demonization campaign. I had heard a lot of the demonization, but I don't pay attention to it because I know the media and our government, even at that time, often says things that aren't true. I know. Are you shocked? Do you have to lay down? And so I started to research, and I was really pleased with what I found when I did more research about Chavez and the Bolivarian Revolution and what he's been able to accomplish in Venezuela since he's been president. So in 2010, I made an application to the government of Venezuela to be able to go and interview him for my radio show, Cindy Sheehan Soapbox. And I thought, well, since I'm going, I should take some cameras. We should get this interview on video. And I thought, maybe not just interview him, but interview people in the communities. Interview other people associated with his government. Interview people pro and con Chavez, not just one. I'm pro. In case you didn't tell, I can't tell I'm very pro Chavez. But to get, but what I have always resisted on my radio show is to give people I disagree with a platform. Not that I think that disagreement is inherently wrong, but people who are pro-war, who are pro-empire, who are pro the 1%, they get 99% of the media. Right? So I wanted to go down and tell Chavez's side of the story. It was done brilliantly in War on Democracy by John Pilger, by the way. And so, but I wanted to tell it, he told it from like a top-down way. I wanted to tell it from a grassroots up way. And my footage, long story short, my footage got stolen by that same person that I was running through Pittsburgh with while David and Sarah were having drinks. But, you know, he turned out not to be a colleague. He turned out to be something different. Stole all the movie footage from me. And so I thought, instead of like becoming depressed or bitter, I thought, well, I have the research. I'll write a book. And so that's why I wrote Revolution, a Love Story. And I think it's important. It doesn't just have implications for Venezuela and South America. I think it's an important story to tell, especially for the U.S. today. Because when Chavez decided to run for president, Venezuela looked a lot like the United States does today. You know, it had two parties. If you can call what we have two parties, you know, very similar. The income disparity was growing. Of course, Venezuela, the poor in Venezuela, far more apparently poorer than we are. And it seemed like the 1%, using the language of Occupy, were taking all the resources out of it, all the wealth, all the resources, and getting rich, while the people who those resources belonged to were getting poorer and poorer and poorer. So he tried to overthrow the government once. He was a military officer. They had a movement in Venezuelan military called the Bolivarian Movement. And they tried to overthrow the government. It didn't work. He went to prison for 3 years. He was pardoned by the next president, got out, and started trying to consolidate political power in the People's Socialist Party. So he went around to Venezuela telling the people there that there is a better way. It's been like this for a long time, but it doesn't always have to be like this. And I think that's a paradigm we get stuck in the United States. You know, it's been like this forever, and nothing's ever going to change. And so it paralyzes us. It paralyzes us to prevent us from going out and trying to make change. Well, Chavez could have been paralyzed by his prison sentence, the failed coup, but he wasn't. He was energized. And he won by a landslide in 1998, became president of Venezuela. And he promised the people of Venezuela the first thing they would do would be to write a new constitution. And so they scrapped the old constitution. They elected a constitutional convention from the people, not the elite, the people. They wrote the Constitution, and then they put it up to a popular referendum, and the Constitution passed. The Constitution has almost 400 articles. The people who can amend the Constitution are the people of Venezuela, not the elites. Venezuela can recall the president. I wish we could recall. We had a thing to recall the president. They have a people's power branch. There's 5 branches of their government. One is called people's power. And Chavez is very charismatic. He is a very forceful personality. It appears when you're looking from the outside that he's very authoritarian because he is so charismatic and forceful, but that's not the case. His first priority when he was elected president was education. The people of Venezuela were illiterate when he took over power. For the first time last year, they met, literacy standards, international literacy standards, because he said an educated population is a population that's active in their communities, active in their country. And so he made education free from preschool to university. He reversed the trend that we have today of only the elite being able to afford to go to college. Not only that, before he became president, many places you had to pay to even go to high school. So the education system was even more elitist in Venezuela than ours is. I met women in the barrios, women 60 and 70 years old, that came up to me. They had just recently learned how to read. Can you imagine? Reading has, since I can't even remember when I couldn't read. And reading has been such a part of my life. I mean, reading is like my best friend. I can't imagine not ever being able to read. But can you try and imagine, like, you're 70 years old and this whole new world is opened up to you? The world of books and magazines and signs. You can read the signs now. I mean, tears, streaming down their faces. And the question I asked everybody is, the amendment to the Constitution that was recently passed doesn't put term limits. There's no term limits in Venezuela anymore. I said, what if President Chavez is president for 25 years, 50 years? They all told me, we hope he's president until he dies. So, and then I used to be for term limits until I went to Venezuela that time and talked to everybody. Why do we prohibit people from voting for who they want to vote for? And that's what term limits does. It's essentially anti-democratic. What if somebody, try to imagine, don't give yourself a headache, but try to imagine that somebody's actually doing a good job as an elected official. And you don't want them to term out, but they term out. So it gets to be, that's why people call him, a lot of people here call him a dictator, because he's been president for 15 years. How long was Roosevelt president? And so the thing is Venezuela, I mean, I'm not saying that any election is free of hinky-pinky. As a matter of fact, I think every election has hinky-pinky because it's so easy, right? It's so easy to fool with elections, especially with computers. But the U.S. sponsored a recall attempt against him. And Jimmy Carter's center went down there. Jimmy Carter went himself. And they, what do they call that? Monitored the elections and certified them. A lot of election protection, international election protectors won't even come to the United States. They say that our elections don't meet criteria, for monitorship. So he's been elected, I think 3 times. He survived a recall attempt, and the most important thing is he survived a coup attempt that was sponsored by the United States. And like somebody pointed out, there's a great movie called The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, that the Irish filmmakers were right there when it started to happen, and they got, privileged footage of the coup attempt. But, so I did get to interview President Chavez, and I got to interview him down in Montevideo, Uruguay. And the reason I interviewed him down there is because there was a new leftist president being inaugurated, Pepe Mujica, who was an Uruguayan freedom fighter. And so I was invited to go on the presidential plane down to Uruguay with him, and with President Chavez, and interview him in a hotel in Montevideo. And I said, why do you keep going? What keeps you going? You know, you've been president for this amount of years. You're going to be up for re-election pretty soon. And he said his love for the people of Venezuela, because he owed them his life. Because when we tried to depose him, you know, he believes he was just hours away from being assassinated. And the people of Venezuela poured into the streets, surrounded Miraflores, the presidential palace, demanded the return of their elected president. Even people who didn't vote for him. Because how dare you try to overthrow somebody that the people of Venezuela overwhelmingly voted for. And so the military that were guarding the coup people, they turned against the people who did the coup and removed them and restored Hugo Chavez. So he's like, I have to do everything I can for the people of Venezuela while I can. And we know that right now he is fighting cancer. He had a tumor discovered, I think, was back in June, a year ago. He went to Cuba. He was having something else happen. They discovered the tumor. They removed it. It grew back, or another tumor grew in the place where the old tumor was. It was very, very devastating news to hear that. And that tumor has been removed. He's been in therapy. I don't agree with the therapy he chose, chemo and radiation. I wish he would have chosen something that actually doesn't kill you, something that cures you. But I'm assured by people in Venezuela that he is cancer-free and he is recovering. And when I see footage of him and pictures and read articles, it does look to me like he's getting some of his vigor back. Because he has an election coming up on October 7th. It's the regular scheduled election. And the opposition finally figured out not to run a bunch of candidates, but to run one candidate against him. They thought that that person would have a better chance, but actually Chavez is leading him in the polls by about 10 percentage points at this time. And I've been invited to go down and observe the election to Venezuela. I'm more excited about that one than the one. I think we have one coming up too, but I'm not sure. I don't know. It's not like always talked about everywhere. And so I'm going to go to Venezuela, and I'm going to be able to meet with President Chavez again and give him. This is why I wrote this book. Because he has done so much for the 99% in his country. He has suffered so much by the hands of our government. And I asked all these intellectuals that I interviewed for my book. I interviewed like, I can see him, but I don't remember his name. I interviewed Gore Vidal, and I interviewed Ed Asner, because he's a Latin America activist, and this wonderful Michael Parenti. I interviewed Michael Parenti. A lot of these leading intellectuals, I said, what is it? Why does the U.S. demonize Chavez? Why are they so afraid of him? And every one of them said because they're afraid of the threat of a good example. That's right. You know, and that's what the U.S., the problem the U.S. has with Castro in Cuba. You know, not only is the U.S. regime super duper pissed that there is a tiny island 90 miles south of the United States that's been able to say, effective F you to the U.S. for over 50 years now. So that's maddening to the robber class. Not only that, but they were afraid that the Cuban Revolution would be successful. They were afraid that the Cuban Revolution would inspire other countries in Latin America to do the same thing. You know why? Because Latin America has been our colony since Bolivar kicked the Spanish and the Portuguese have been kicked off. Ever since the end of the 1700s, Latin America has been the colony of the United States of America. We have been, you know, we're so worried, and rightfully so, about what the U.S. is doing in the Middle East and in Asia. But right in our own hemisphere, the U.S. has been profoundly involved in murder and torture and rape. And, you know, they take out leftist, populist governments to install dictators that are friendly to the United States. I don't think I'm telling anybody anything here that you don't know. You know, but when Cuba overthrew the butcher of Havana, Batista, and started a communist revolution to help the people of Cuba, the United States rightfully started to get worried. And if it wasn't for the Cuban Revolution, there wouldn't be a Bolivarian revolution. So, before the threat of the good example named Hugo Chavez Frias, there was a Castro's in Cuba that inspired Hugo Chavez. And exciting things are happening in Latin America today. It's like, if you want to be an activist, that's an exciting place to be. They're standing up to privatization of water. You know, they're standing up to knocking down the rainforest. They're in the trenches. The least we owe these people and their leaders is the truth. That's the very least that we owe them. And that's why I wrote this, because we all should be grateful to President Hugo Chavez and the people of Venezuela for being that threat of a good example, because they are a good example. And if they can do it in Venezuela, where people were illiterate 14, 15 years ago, why can't we do that here? Why can't we do this in the United States? And so that's why I wrote the book, to not only dispel the myths about Hugo Chavez and the Bolivarian Revolution, but to inspire that same kind of action here. Now, there's also a lot of exciting things happening in Iceland. And people always say, oh gosh, I wish we were like Iceland. Iceland doesn't even have as many people as Sacramento, California. Iceland probably doesn't even have as many people as Portland, Oregon. They have, I don't know, how many people do you have here?
About 800,000.
No, yeah, Iceland, you guys like over twice the size of Iceland. Iceland has 300,000 people. You know, so I think in smaller chunks of population, you can do better things. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be inspired by Iceland. You know, but it's kind of unrealistic to think that 300 million people are going to do the same thing as 300,000 people. And Venezuela only has 26 million people. California has 40 million people. You know, so that just shows me what we need to do is break our activism into much smaller pieces. Right? That's, I don't know. If you agree with, I think everybody's going like this. The only answer to globalization is localization. And Iceland's been able to do it on a micro kind of thing. Chavez has been able to do it on a larger schedule. Schedule's not the right word. Scale. Well, at least it started with the same two letters. And, you know, the Castros have been able to do it down in Cuba with 11 million people on their tiny island.
Only person to cast out the mafia of Queens, the presidents, anybody like that. the only one to ever do that.
Okay, I'm not sure what that. The Castros, when they got rid of the mob out of, yeah. So, thank you. You kind of threw me off my little. I told you I have attention deficit disorder. But anyway, this subject excites me. You know, inspires me. It motivates me to keep on going. So, I don't know. I think I should probably go to some kind of program because I'm actually thinking of running for governor of California. Don't clap. It's insane. It's insane. I need help. I need intervention. Some of you guys need to get me in a room and have an intervention on me because I ran for Congress against Nancy Pelosi. I still have PTSD from that campaign. The system is rigged against us. Here, I know this. I know this, but I want to be able to talk to the people of California about the Bolivarian-Revolution. I want to say maybe we can't do it in the U.S., but maybe we can do it in California. Maybe we can make my state a leader again instead of a pit. You know, when I was going to school in California, it was, I started kindergarten in 1962. Corporations were paying a minimum of 33%. Today they're paying like a maximum of 13%. Jerry Brown has been a disaster for social services, for education. He keeps cutting back. We have budget deficits. The first thing that goes is social services, welfare, aid to families, education. Those are the first things that get cut. And if I run, I won't even open a campaign office. I actually in 2008 thought I might have a chance of winning, which shows how naive I was at that point. I did come in second, so I got 50,000 votes, so maybe those same 50,000 people would vote for me for governor. You know, so at least I have 50,000 votes for governor. But, and it's only because I want to keep telling people there is a better way. We don't have to keep doing these same things over and over and over again. You know, we don't have to allow the 1% or the robber classes, I call them, to keep on stealing our resources, our children, to kill in their wars and kill other people's children. You know, the only reason that these things happen is because we're so codependent with the 1%. And another thing I would say about the 1% versus 99% is it doesn't even seem like 99% of the 99% even get it. You know, I think they know there's a problem, but I think that they think it's a problem with them and not a problem with the system, right? So we need people to constantly be telling them, you know, about this better way. I don't know if running for governor is a good way for me to do that, but it's kind of a population similar to Venezuela in California, except we have more people. So people said, well, you better get busy, you better start raising money, you better start doing this. But, you know, no, I know I don't have a chance of winning, but maybe I have a chance of spreading the message more effectively, and that's what it's about. It's about spreading the message more effectively. Be easier in a smaller state like Oregon. You know, maybe I should move up here and run for governor of Oregon. Might be easier to get the message out. So, I have so many things to talk about and to share with you, but I think that I usually forget half of the things I wanted to talk about and share with you. I would encourage you to buy a copy of my book. Not only is it informative, I think inspirational, but it helps keep me on the streets. And it helps me to be a full-time activist without actually having to get a job and have my money confiscated by the IRS. I am a war tax. I borrowed your terminology, Brian. I used to be a war tax resistor. Now I'm a war tax refuser. Since I've been in federal court recently, being sued by the IRS. Actually, the U.S. Attorney on behalf of the IRS, and it's not political. It's not a political persecution, but they sent 4 U.S. attorneys from Washington, D.C. to Sacramento. I think they have U.S. attorneys actually in Sacramento. But it's not political. No. And so I have this hearing, and I got to tell you this story. The magistrate in the Ninth Circuit Court was hearing the case. He allowed my attorney, and this is unprecedented if you're an activist that does civil resistance or civil disobedience or whatever. You've been arrested, you go to court, they say, we don't care why you did it. You did it, and this is your fine. You broke the law, this is your fine. Well, the magistrate let my attorney go on and on and on. You know, she's against the war, she's against torture, she's against the expansion of the empire, she's against militarism. Her son was killed, blah, 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 on and on and on. And when my attorney stopped, I was like going, wow, when's the judge going to stop him? When's the judge going to stop him? And he never did. And when my attorney finally stopped, the magistrate looked right at me. And he said, your response seems to be a civilized response to something so uncivilized. And I started crying. I have never had anybody in this government acknowledge why I do what I do in such a simple yet beautiful way. And then the U.S. attorney, she stood up and said, well, Judge, will you order her to comply with us? He goes, I don't think I'm going to do that. He said, it's 45 days from now, I have to respond. I might not. He goes, but it's lunchtime. Miss Sheehan has a plane to catch. I think we're going to wrap this up now. And I was like, what the shit just happened? I was like, holy crap. Nothing like that ever happened to me before in my legal struggles. So to be a little cooperative, I have, agreed to meet with the IRS. And I could tell them what I felt I could tell them. Anything else, I took the fifth. And anything that has to do with me paying any money is absolutely out of the question. Oh, you should file and you'll reduce your what you owe us and blah, blah, blah. I said, I don't care if you say I owe you $100,000, if I owe you $100, I owe you $1, I'm not paying. So, this is just an exercise in futility. But I met with the IRS back at the U.S. District Court, and our meeting was at 11. It was over at noon. I walked out. On the door was a poster for a lunch meeting they were going to have called Conscience and the Constitution. And I was like, what? They didn't ask me to talk at any lunch meeting. But it was about Japanese internees during World War II that refused to be drafted because they were interned in prison camps. And PBS had made a documentary about them. And I told the attorney that walked us out, I said, is this did you do this on purpose? Because I'm refusing to pay my taxes based on conscience. You're saying that it was good for them to do it, but you're persecuting me for doing exactly the same thing? Why did I start talking about my taxes? And so, I don't even know. And recently, like 2 days ago, I was in Santa Barbara because some of us got arrested trespassing on Vandenberg Air Force Base last February because they were launching an ICBM test missile that lands in the Marshall Islands. And so we protested that. Some of us actually wanted to deliver a letter to the base commander, including Daniel Ellsberg, you guys might have heard of him, Father Louis Vitale, a Chumash native, and Vandenberg is right on Chumash land. Vandenberg has permitted access to their sacred, one of the most sacred indigenous sites is Point Concepcion. They call it the Western Gate. They've blocked access to their sacred ancestral lands and stuff and things like that. So I signed unsupervised probation for that one, and I'm not supposed to get in trouble. And that kind of puts a damper on what we were planning to do, and that's backcountry incursion onto Vandenberg. You know, we're going to go hiking into Vandenberg because whenever you do that, they have to stop everything. All operations stop when they detect a foreign body on their base. It's a huge base. And so my trial is October 17th. Our first planned backcountry trip is October 22nd. So I won't be under, unless I get convicted and put on probation or whatever. So I don't know how that's relevant to anything, but I know you're going to ask me questions, you know, and I think that this would be a good time now. And Malcolm has something to say before we start the Q&A. Thank you, Malcolm.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Yes.
I would suggest we need a new mayor.
Oh, you mean a new mayor? You mean the mayor of Portland's not the same one in the show Portlandia? Because he seems kind of cool, that mayor. I'm crazy, I know that. I know, I seriously need an intervention for even thinking of running for office again. Really, except if it's going to be, I don't know, president of my sorority or something.
I have a question about Venezuela. I know when the coup happened, there were some images that came out of people protesting at the Cuban embassy, and then they were identified as being part of these really wealthy families that own a lot of the media. Can you talk about what Chavez did with the media in Venezuela and what those big families were?
Okay, which Cuban embassy? In D.C.?
No, in Venezuela.
Oh, in Venezuela. I don't really know about the protests at the Cuban embassy. Was that during the coup?
They were supporting the coup.
Supporting the coup.
Yes.
The media, people who oppose Chavez always say, well, he's shut down the media that opposes him. Well, all you have to do is go to Venezuela and see that's not true. You turn on the TV, and there's much opposition on private stations to Hugo Chavez. And in fact, the media, during the coup, lied. I know, it's shocking. It's shocking that media lies. The coup, what do you call people who are doing a coup? The coup, the cooers? The cooers?
CIA.
The CIA?
Yeah.
The CIA shut down the state television. They turned it off. And so there's also a famous scene where people are being shot at, right? And they redid the footage to make it seem like forces loyal to Chavez was shooting on the protesters. from a bridge. Well, the protest didn't even go under that bridge. It was forces loyal to the CIA that was firing on forces loyal to Chavez. And so there have been a few media outlets shut down while Chavez has been president, but it's mostly in violation of their licensing. Now, Venezuela recognizes that the public airwaves are public commons. They don't belong to Rupert Murdoch. Not all of them, at least, right? But they do have, they have something comparable to the FCC that we have. So the outlets that have been temporarily shut down, most of the time they comply with, the regulations, and they're put back on the air. Like I said, the conservative Miami Cuban set doesn't like Chavez, even more than they don't like me. So I talk a lot about the media, Chavez and the media in the book, by the way. Kevin.
When should I rent the moving van?
The moving van. Kevin's been trying to get me up here for a long. Portland is more friendly to my kind of thinking and not just activism, but I don't own a car. I ride my bike. I, try to grow my own food. All the great things that the city is friendly to. Not so friendly where I live. Not so friendly. So, it would be the only thing you guys don't have that my town has is my 4 grandbabies. So if you convince my 4 grandbabies, I don't even need their parents. Just convince my 4 grandbabies to move up, there'd be no question. No question in my life.
Accept that challenge.
All right. Okay, you and then you.
I'm Mike, and I was in Crawford when you were down there. I don't know what it was. When I found out you were there, I did something. I just got on. I didn't even think about it. I just got on the phone, made reservations, flew down there, rented a van, drove down there, and I remember I'd seen pictures of you, but I remember driving up and rolling my window down, and I said, "Cindy," I said, "I'm Mike. I'm a Vietnam vet, and I've come down from Portland," and you just said, "Welcome," But I think there's something I need to say that's extremely important, and I think that everybody in this group is going to agree with what I have to say. I have a tremendous amount of respect for somebody who has been the punching bag for millions of ignorant people in this country. And that has taken tremendous courage to do that.
Are you talking about me, or Chavez, or Castro, or does any number?
I'm talking about what you've had to put up with, and I think that's important. I personally think that history is going to be very good to you. I really do. 50 years from now, I think history is going to be extremely good for you. So I guess it's just important, because I remember when I was down in Crawford, I had a meltdown because of the pro-war people that were there. I got nauseated. I just got freaking nauseated, and so I had a meltdown, and I went after the anti-war people. I started giving lectures on Vietnam History 101, and so I know that you've taken a lot of shit from a lot of people, but I just know that I'm almost positive that history will be extremely good to you, and I just want to say that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mike. I think anybody who talks counter-cultural, I'm sure there's many people in this room who've taken a lot of shit for what they've done, which is, far greater than what I've done. But for all the crap I get twice as much support and twice as much love. And people will say, "Oh, Cindy, I saw so-and-so say something mean about you, or I've gotten death threats, and they're like, how do you put up with it? And there's just one basic thing. I buried my son, and I'm still standing here. I'm still talking. I'm still laughing. I'm still living. If I could survive burying my son, I can survive being called a media whore. If I can survive burying my son, I can survive lies about me. So I'm metaphorically bulletproof. I don't think that I am literally bulletproof. I'm metaphorically bulletproof in that way. I just don't give a shit. And I was like, what are you going to do? You're going to call me a name? Ooh. Oh my goodness. I'm going to cry myself to sleep. Not.
So you had a question?
I admire you, Cindy, for all what you did and for your political activities and historical background. But I want to bring an example from the Middle East. Nasser of Egypt in 1967, he announced his resignation from the politics, but his people went out in the street calling him to come again. And I think if he refused at that moment to go back to be a leader and give somebody else's a chance to build Egypt, then all this 50 years history of really suppressing the people won't happen. So we are really building a system despite the fact that the person is good or bad.
Right.
We are building a system, and if Shiva is good, he should be turning himself down and helping and bringing a new person to the power, more democratic and with open-minded. And he has to act as an advisor. We need to bring more people. If there is one only people that is good and working well, and then if he died, then the corruption and dictatorship will continue again.
I agree with you, but I support what the people of Venezuela want, not what Cindy Sheehan wants. You know, we have to respect the sovereignty of countries. So even though I agree with you, it's not up to me, and it's not up to you. It's up to the people of Venezuela. So we'll see. They have another chance to vote him out in October. It's not like he is usurping the power, and every election says, if the people vote me out, I'll go. Right? He's very open about that. So I would be disappointed if he lost, and a lot of his supporters in Venezuela would be disappointed. But we have to trust the people of Venezuela, I guess, to exhibit what they want. There are a lot of great people around Chavez, because I'm not even certain that he's going to survive his cancer. And people always ask me, Cindy, what's going to happen if Chavez dies? I'm convinced that the people of Venezuela won't let the revolution die if he dies. They're too invested in it. They've gained too much from it, and the biggest thing they've gained is education and empowerment. So, you know, we just have to see what unfolds, and we can't compare Chavez to Mubarak.
No, sir.
I know, but I know what you're trying to say, but you said they've had 50 years of bad times in Egypt. But if Chavez stayed, it wouldn't be that way. You know what I'm trying to say? Yeah, it's apples and oranges, I think, that we're trying to compare. It's systemic, but what Chavez is doing is trying to buck the system of the IMF, the World Bank. the U.S. militarism. You know, he's trying to change that system for the people of Venezuela. You know, I'm not saying that he's not a little part of the system. I mean, even though I know him well and I admire him, there's something about a president of any country that I don't trust. And I think that's maybe because I've been so abused in my own country, you know, by the system, that I don't trust. I'm more of an anarchist at heart. And the thing that I like about Venezuela is that they have given power to neighborhood councils. You know, the neighborhood councils have a lot of power in Venezuela, and they have a branch called the People Power. So it's not anarchism, but they have more of a say of what happens in their country than we do and what happens in our country. Any other? Yes?
That's one thing that I remember about that movie that goes along with what you were saying was so powerful, is that when he became president, he himself went out and began to educate the people about their constitutional rights and sent out groups all over so that the people, even though they were illiterate, had this sense of their power, so that when this government of ours came in to overthrow, they came because they knew that he was still their president until he, I think, signed something or something. He never did that.
No, he refused.
So they refused to leave. And to me, that's the power of your rights, the power of the people. And I just will never forget that. It's so beautiful.
It was very beautiful. Also, in Venezuela, every bag of rice and every bag of beans has an article of the Constitution on it. One article that the people, when they go buy subsidized rice, subsidized beans, they can read part of their Constitution. Now they can read it. So that makes it even more special. Yes?
I wanted to follow up with what this lady was talking about in terms of the system that's been established in Venezuela, and you seem to talk against term limits. So you said that there were some strong people. Are there strong enough people that can continue the same system? I mean, he is going to die. I mean, that's pretty...
Eventually.
So, I think that's one of the problems with some really strong leaders is that when they go, then the whole system falls apart. So I'd like to know what your prognosis for that is.
What was I going to say? I was thinking. Oh, even the opposition leader knows that he can't get rid of the programs that Chavez instituted. So even though that person was going to be more friendly to the corporations and the IMF and the World Bank, he knows he can't get rid of the free education or the health care or the dental care. So it won't be a total collapse back to before Chavez. There's a really strong person in Chavez's administration, the foreign minister. His name is Nicolai Maduro. And it seems like he's being groomed in the, unspeakable case that Chavez doesn't survive his cancer to take over leadership of the party, the People's Socialist Party. So I've been to Venezuela, and I've spent a lot of time with the people who are close to Chavez, and I go a lot to the consulates and the embassy here and around the world, and I speak to a lot of people who are close to him and to the revolution. And there's a lot of people who are really supportive of the revolution and who would fight to keep the revolution going. Whatever happens, it might not be smooth transition, but I think it's more possible that things will turn out good than bad.
So he has a vice president. If he died today, a vice president would take over. Is that right?
There is a vice president, yes. And I'm not, I don't know the Constitution enough to what would be, here, of course, the vice president takes over, or the Speaker of the House. if something happens. And then, of course, it's Alexander Haig is next in line. I still remember that from the 80s. Until the next election. Some places they call a special election. I'm not exactly sure what the process is in Venezuela. The vice president is not nearly as strong as Maduro is, though. So, yes.
Do you know the basis of Venezuela's economy, and also the second thing is, did you take any aid from the U.S.?
The basis of the Venezuelan economy is something that is one of the things I have a horrible problem with, and it's a fossil fuel based economy. They have the largest reserve of fossil fuels in our hemisphere. Oil, yeah. And all the social programs that are run are paid by these oil. But the difference is now, instead of all the proceeds going to the 1%, the wealth is being equalized, where Chavez and the revolution has cut income disparity by 50% since he's been president. Here in the United States, it's growing, and we have the widest income disparity of any so-called first world nation here in the United States. So it's based on oil, which I think that I would hope if Chavez, is granted healing and a third or fourth term, I'm not sure what he's on now, that one of his main programs would be to transition away from that.
Any idea what you would transition to?
Well, anything that we would transition, our economy would our energy would transition to any clean, sustainable, renewable forms of energy.
Oh, I was thinking about their economy. What else would they earn a living?
I mean, there's, if you transition from dirty energy to green energy, there's a lot of jobs there, and they're better jobs and healthier jobs. So, and what you had a second part to that question.
Do they take foreign aid from
No, they do not take foreign aid from the United States. They trade a lot with China and Russia. Yeah, those are and China is becoming very brilliant with their diplomacy. They're like consolidating goodwill in places like Latin America and Africa. And of course, the United States, the last thing I heard was Africa is what? The leading sponsor of terrorism in the world today. And we're really increasing AFRICOM and troop presence and drones and drone bases now in Africa. So, no, they don't take any aid. They've tried to give aid to us. When Katrina happened, they tried. And Robert Kennedy Jr. put out a call years ago and said people in the Northeast can't afford heating oil. He asked every oil company to help subsidize that. The only one that answered that call was Citgo, the U.S. branch of PDVSA, the Venezuelan state oil company. They subsidize low-cost heating oil for the people in the Northeast. Yeah, so and Chavez is brilliant. I don't agree with fossil fuels or profit off of them, but he'll trade to Cuba for doctors. He'll trade to Brazil for beef. He's using it in a real and then subsidize heating oil in the United States. I don't know, we don't have Citgos where I live, but if you have a Citgo and you have to drive a car, you don't have one either. But there are some also in a lot of other places too. Chicago
Midwest.
Chicago has a ton of sickos. If I drove a car and if I had to buy fuel, I would try to always buy from Sicko. So, yes, Joe.
One thing, Cindy, I think that happens is our American tax dollars do funnel into Venezuela as pro-democracy type. And they funnel it in through supporting...
Thank you for reminding me, Joe.
Yeah, supporting democracy down there. It doesn't go to Chavez and the people. It goes to probably really work against what he's trying to do down there. And it's a lot of money that we funnel down in there through the National Endowment for Democracy or something like that.
National Endowment of Democracy, USAID. It's been estimated since Chavez has been president, the U.S. has funneled $80 million down to Venezuela to the opposition. And that's a very, very good point. So yeah, like Joe said, U.S. tax dollars are going to Venezuela, but to the opposition. They even finance the opposition political campaigns. That's illegal in the United States, to accept foreign donations when you run. John Gold?
I just went out to Cyber City, I don't know if you mentioned it, but the School of the Americas, where is that? Like, I know they changed.
It's still at Fort Benning.
And they're still doing their shtick?
Cooperation.
Yeah, of course, Venezuela and Bolivia, and I'm not sure which other countries don't have anybody trained at the School of Americas anymore. Ecuador still does, and they have a so-called leftist president. So really, instead of, as well as pressuring Correa to grant asylum to Assange, we should be pressuring him to cut his ties with the School of Americas. It was so brilliant when he became president, and he closed that base in Ecuador and said, hey, if you let Ecuador put a base in Miami, you can keep your base here in Ecuador. So it's called WINSEC now, Western Hemispheric. Yeah. Terrible, terrible, awful, awful place. Okay. I think that's good. We'll be over here signing books, selling books, signing books.